of the G20 over the past 12 months. It has been a very productive year. Argentina focused on 3 priorities, which are priorities for us all: the future of work, infrastructure development, and sustainable food. These priorities aligned well with those of the G7 summit in Charlevoix, Quebec last June, where we worked hard to create economic systems that benefit everyone and strengthen the middle class. Je félicite aussi l'Argentine d'avoir abordé les discussions sous l'angle de l'égalité des sexes. Nous savons que nos économies et nos sociétés sont plus fortes quand les femmes participent et s'impliquent pleinement. Au cours des 2 jours que nous avons passés ici, j'ai réitéré l'engagement du Canada à l'égard du multilatéralisme dans les dossiers du commerce, de l'emploi, du climat et d'autres enjeux que nous avons en commun. Parce qu'aucun pays ne peut espérer de résoudre seul les problèmes auxquels les pays du monde sont confrontés, nous devons travailler ensemble. Le G20 nous offre une tribune cruciale pour le faire. Comme vous le savez sans doute, le Canada a joué un rôle de premier plan dans la création du G20 et dans la première réunion des dirigeants du G20 en 2008, au milieu de la crise financière internationale. I'd like to congratulate Argentina for bringing a perspective of gender equality to our talks. We know that our economies and our societies are stronger when women are full and equal participants. Over our 2 days here, I've reiterated Canada's commitment to multilateralism, on trade, on climate, and other challenges we share. Indeed, no country can solve global problems on its own. We need to work together. The G20 offers us a critically important forum for doing so. As you may know, Canada played a leading role in the creation of the G20, as well as its elevation to the leaders level in 2008 in the midst of the international financial crisis. And over the years, this forum has repeatedly demonstrated its worth as we seek to build a more stable and prosperous world. From the outset, our objective here was to make progress on the big challenges we face as a planet: economic growth that benefits everyone, protecting the environment, and peace and security in the world. And I'm happy to say we reached consensus on a communiqué with important commitments in key areas: creating jobs and preparing people for the future of work by focusing on skills and education, fighting climate change and investing in clean energy, investing in infrastructure to foster sustainable economic growth, fair, open trade that creates good jobs and grows the middle class, and gender equality, girls' education, and women's economic empowerment. And as you know, yesterday we took the opportunity here to sign a new free trade agreement with Mexico and the United States. Those negotiations were not easy, but Canadians worked together and put their country's interests first. We did so because we know economic stability, trade, and growth are in the best interest of middle-class families in all 3 of our countries. I also met with my counterparts from Argentina, South Africa, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, and Japan, to name just a few. Speaking at the Business Women's Leaders Task Force panel, I was proud to share the podium with Ms. Sharzad Rafati, an incredible Canadian entrepreneur and pioneer who works to put ideals into action each and every day as Canada's representative on the Business Women Leaders Task Force and as CEO of a major Canadian company. We can and we must do more to help all people adapt to changing economic realities and make real, meaningful investments in their futures. Canada believes creating new opportunities for the middle class is the single best way to restore people's confidence in the future and stem the uncertainty that often accompanies globalization and technological change. Our citizens have asked us to work together to ensure a better, safer, and more secure world. That is the message that I brought to the table, and we renewed our commitment to do just that. Le Canada a fait un travail important ici au G20 en Argentine afin de renforcer notre économie et la classe moyenne et pour bâtir un avenir meilleur et un monde plus sécuritaire. Merci beaucoup de vous être joints à nous aujourd'hui. Je suis prêt maintenant à prendre vos questions.
Hi, Josh Wingrove with Bloomberg News. Prime Minister, 6 months ago you led talks to get a consensus, however briefly, at the G7 This communique today includes quite a few compromises. There's no mention of Ukraine. There's no mention of the death of Jamal Khashoggi or freedom of the press related to that. There's no mention on Yemen. There is no mention of protectionism for the first time in the history of the G20. What is the merit, in your mind, of a document like this, and what do you say to people who think that it is so watered down that there's no point in having one?
The first thing to understand that the G20 is a gathering, its primary responsibility is to bring together the large economies of the world and talk about economic issues. Obviously, we are very different countries with a broad range of issues facing us in different spheres, but the focus is and always has been on how to create economic growth that benefits the largest number possible of our citizens, of citizens around the world. And when we came together with historic commitments to reform the WTO, for example, as mentioned in the communique, which is something that Canada has taken a front row lead on over the past months in terms of trying to move forward in a way that will strengthen the rules-based order around the world through the WTO, where we've got commitments on gender, whether it's involving women and girls, looking at education, looking at opportunities for economic empowerment. There are significant moves in a broad range of areas. We also committed to the challenge that is both social, planetary, and economic of addressing climate change. And the countries that are part of the Paris Agreement put forward very strong language in the communique, committing ourselves to action and leadership. The world is looking to the G20 to address the big issues that we are facing, and these are things that we have done in that communique and around the table. Le G20 demeure d'abord et avant tout un forum pour discuter d'enjeux économiques qui préoccupent le monde, que ce soit au niveau de la croissance qui a des impacts positifs sur tout le monde, que ce soit au niveau du commerce. Nous sommes toujours là pour regarder comment nous allons améliorer le sort des citoyens à travers la planète. Nous avons souligné avec beaucoup d'enthousiasme l'engagement des pays du G20 à la réforme, par exemple, de l'OMC, ce qui est un enjeu que le Canada mène depuis quelques semaines, en rassemblant différents pays pour parler de comment on va renforcer le système au niveau du commerce mondial et les règles qui s'y appliquent. On a aussi parlé des femmes et des filles, on a aussi parlé de la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Il y a beaucoup d'enjeux économiques dont on a pu discuter qui ont été à l'avant-plan dans le communiqué et lors de nos discussions.
Follow-up. Would you say you're happy with this communique?
I think any time the major economies of the world can come together and commit to work together on the big issues that matter to Canadians and to citizens of the world, that is a good thing. People look to this extraordinary disparate group of nations, and when they see that we are focusing on the issues that matter to them and to their family's economic future, that is a good thing.
Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. M. Trudeau, vous aviez une occasion rêvée au G20 de rencontrer en tête-à-tête, de vous adresser, de regarder quelqu'un droit dans les yeux. Et là, je parle de Vladimir Poutine, de Mohamed Ben Salman, pour exprimer vos craintes par rapport à l'Ukraine, par rapport au Yémen, par rapport à l'affaire Khashoggi. Pourquoi vous avez choisi de ne pas leur parler directement?
Dans la première session, hier matin, c'était une rencontre avec tous les chefs. J'ai pris l'occasion de souligner directement à Vladimir Poutine qu'on est extrêmement préoccupé par la situation dans la mer d'Azov, qu'on est extrêmement préoccupé par l'emprisonnement des marins ukrainiens. Et je lui ai dit qu'il fallait qu'il remette en liberté ces marins et qu'il permette l'accès aux mers d'Azov. C'est quelque chose que j'ai dit directement au président Poutine hier matin. Par rapport à l'Arabie saoudite, dans cette même conversation, j'ai dit directement au prince à quel point il fallait avoir de meilleures réponses sur le meurtre de Khashoggi. Et j'ai beaucoup parlé de cette crise humanitaire épouvantable qui se passe au Yémen et du besoin d'avoir un cessez-le-feu immédiat pour permettre à de l'aide humanitaire et que nous sommes, en tant que Canadiens, mais en tant que citoyens du monde, extrêmement préoccupés par cette situation. Plus tard dans la journée, hier soir, lors du souper offert par l'Argentine, j'ai pris un moment avec le prince pour continuer cette conversation, pour parler des enjeux diplomatiques qui ont été entre le Canada et l'Arabie saoudite et pour souligner que le Canada va toujours se tenir clairement haut et fort pour parler des droits de la personne. Lui ai partagé la préoccupation des Canadiens par rapport au sort de Raif Badawi et notre espoir de le voir libéré bientôt. Et nous avons aussi discuté d'enjeux économiques entre nos deux pays. Le G20 est un endroit justement où les différents chefs peuvent avoir des interactions directes et personnelles comme ça. Et j'ai été content de pouvoir avoir ces interactions. Yesterday morning, our first event was a leaders' retreat in which I took a moment to speak directly to President Putin, impressing upon him our concerns with the situation in the Sea of Azov and the Ukrainian sailors that have been taken prisoner, asking him to release those Ukrainian sailors and permit free passage into the Sea of Azov. I also spoke directly to the Crown Prince to highlight our concerns and our need for better answers on the killing of Khashoggi, and also the need for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian aid to go to Yemen, which is the largest humanitarian catastrophe going on in the world right now, and is a subject that we brought up repeatedly in various conversations throughout this G20. Yesterday evening, in the margins of the dinner offered by Argentina, I took the opportunity to have a conversation with the Crown Prince directly, in which we discussed the diplomatic dispute between Canada and Saudi Arabia that has been going on since August, highlighting that Canada would always stand up strongly and clearly for human rights in and around the world. I highlighted Canadians' preoccupation with the continued imprisonment of Raif Badawi and expressed hopes for release soon. And we also discussed a number of economic issues between our two countries. The G20 context is exactly a context where we can have these direct conversations amongst leaders, and I was pleased to be able to take these opportunities to do just that.
Il vous a répondu quoi, M. Ben Salman, sur la question de Raif Badawi et de l'affaire Khashoggi?
C'est pas à moi de parler de ce que les autres chefs ont dit pendant une rencontre des leaders, mais je peux dire que sur la conversation que j'avais sur Raif Badawi en soirée, il m'a souligné qu'il était très conscient de l'enjeu et qu'il était en train de regarder la situation.
Christy Kirkup, Canadian Press. Just wondering, in response to what you relayed to President Putin, do you fear there could be repercussions, and how did he respond?
There wasn't an opportunity for President Putin to speak after me in the leaders' retreat. He had spoken before. But for me, it is obvious that this is an issue that concerns not just Canada, but a number of our NATO allies. I had a number of conversations with fellow leaders like Germany, France, the UK, and others on our preoccupation with the situation in Ukraine, and we are all very much hoping that there will be a de-escalation and a release of those prisoners.
In your discussion with MBS, we saw that in August, Saudi Arabia was quick to lash out in response to comments that were made specifically by Canada, a retaliation of sorts. What makes you confident that talking to him will have any type of impact on what he does?
I continue to believe that conversations, frank and direct conversations between leaders is better than not talking. I think having an opportunity to speak directly and frankly and highlight Canada's strong views on various matters, but also our desire to move towards a peaceful and better world in which human rights are better protected is something that Canadians expect of me, and indeed world leaders have grown to expect from Canada.
Evan Dyer, CBC News. Prime Minister, you mentioned that you spoke with the Crown Prince. I'm just wondering, both in the leaders' session and in your face-to-face conversation at the dinner, what did he say to you? And did you get that sort of "this is nobody else's business" type of response, or you get the sense that in the wake of Khashoggi that he's willing to listen more to other countries talking about what goes inside?
It is not for me to characterize what another leader said during a leaders' retreat. But certainly in our conversation at the dinner, we had a frank conversation in which it was clear that I made it clear that Canada was concerned, but also looking to improve opportunities and protections and rights for people around the world, including in Saudi Arabia, and that we were there to primarily be preoccupied about the situation in Yemen. This is a conversation that has come up many times over the course of this summit. I had extensive conversations on the humanitarian crisis, and it is really top of mind for a lot of people here now.
And you mentioned Yemen, you're pushing for a humanitarian corridor. If you get that, if there's a ceasefire and a corridor is open, what would the government of Canada do? What would it use that corridor to do?
We have, as I said, spoken with allies in German, French, British, American. We've talked with the United Nations about how we can move forward as a global community and give better succor and support to the people in Yemen who are living a humanitarian catastrophe of extraordinarily large proportions. We want to be helpful, but we understand that it always works better when it is a coordinated international effort amongst allies, and that's very much the kinds of conversations that we have been having over these past few days.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Joyce Napier, CTV. Well, about this humanitarian corridor, in order to have one, there has to be a ceasefire. Is there any pressure that you and other leaders here can put on the Crown Prince to get this to happen? Because there are millions of people who are threatened with starvation, who are trying to flee the war and can't even get out. So it's not, they don't have that much more time.
Indeed, that is exactly the point I made in the leaders' retreat. The scale of the calamity, the up to 15 million people who are in danger of starvation in Yemen, that really require concerted and coordinated efforts to deliver humanitarian aid, to have an immediate ceasefire. That is what I made clear, and that is the tenor of the conversations that we have been having amongst leaders on how we can move forward in a concrete and substantial way in very short order, because, as you say, the situation is dire and getting worse.
David Aiken, Global News. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. 8,000 Canadians have died from fentanyl overdoses in the last 2 years, and there's some pretty clear evidence that China is the source of the vast majority of this drug. Law enforcement sources are telling our organization that the Chinese are not cooperating, and in fact, the situation is getting worse. I think I saw you last night sitting next to President Xi at the performance at the theater. I wondered if you brought this issue up with President Xi. What did you say to him? And why would we not characterize the Chinese inaction as a hostile act by a foreign nation that is literally killing Canadians?
China has been actually working with Canadian officials and Canadian law enforcement over the past months to take measures on the flow of fentanyl into Canada. There is obviously, as you say, more to do. We recognize that this is a crisis that is continuing in Canada and indeed getting worse. We will continue to work with international partners like the United States and indeed engage with China as a way of ensuring that we are doing a better job of connecting Canadians, because the tragedies going on in communities and in families right across this country from opioid overdoses, unfortunately, are continuing.
The United States has taken action against specific individuals, Chinese individuals, charging them with crimes. I know crimes aren't your territory, but because Canadian authorities do know the identity of some Chinese officials involved in importing fentanyl, why not use Magnitsky Act provisions against those Chinese officials that want to move fentanyl into Canada?
We take the opioid crisis extremely seriously in Canada and continue to recognize that there are many different tools that we need to use to keep Canadians safe, and we are pursuing all those tools, whether it's support for frontline workers on the ground, working with provincial health authorities, working to give law enforcement new tools, working with medical professionals to strengthen some of the prescription guidelines and indeed provide alternative opportunities for prescriptions, and work with international partners. We will continue to look at all different measures we can bring in to keep Canadians safe.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Katie Simpson, CBC News. Can you please walk us through the very first time your office learned that Raj Grewal was being investigated by police, and how many times that issue came to your office? Can you walk us through that, please?
On Wednesday of last week, I was apprised of Mr. Grewal's gambling problem. That was the first time at which I became aware of that, and I understand my office became aware of that within a day or so prior to briefing me. In regards to police investigations, we were aware that the RCMP was asking questions related to the India trip and the ethics investigation that was going on around Mr. Grewal, but we had no information at that point that there was any connection to a gambling problem that we had no information on. And as always, the RCMP conducts its investigations independently. Comme j'ai dit à la Chambre des communes, j'ai été informé mercredi par mon bureau du problème de jeu qu'avait M. Grewal. Mon bureau en est devenu conscient juste dans la journée ou deux avant ça. Par rapport aux questions de la GRC, on était conscient que la GRC était en train de poser des questions sur le voyage en Inde en lien avec l'enjeu qui était devant le commissaire à l'éthique, mais nous n'avions aucune information liée à son problème de jeu. Et comme j'ai dit, la GRC fait ses enquêtes de façon indépendante.
So the RCMP started asking questions around Mr. Grewal, I believe, several months ago when it came to the India trip. At that time, why didn't your office do something? Perhaps maybe, did your office not have concerns that a member of your caucus was being investigated by police? Why not do something?
The RCMP conducts its investigations independently, and in the matter facing the ethics commissioner, we were confident that the ethics commissioner was doing their job.
Last question.
Caroline Stoffer, Reuters. What do you think the prospects are of the U.S. lifting steel and aluminum tariffs? Are you concerned they'll be long-term?
We have continued to highlight the challenges posed by the tariffs on steel and aluminum and our countervailing duties on consumers and producers and businesses on both sides of the border. We know that tariffs represent a challenge to the free trade that has been a tremendous source of success for Canadians and for Americans over the past decades. And we will continue to work with American members of Congress and members of the administration to try and have those tariffs lifted.
Trump also says he's thankful for low oil prices. Do you have a response from Canada?
I am obviously concerned with the situation, particularly around the price differential facing Canadian oil from Alberta. We know that one of the best ways of reducing that differential is to get a pipeline built to new markets done in the right way, and that's why we are following the blueprint put forward by the Federal Court of Appeals on that. But as always, our heart goes out to families and communities that are suffering in Alberta and across the country because of the challenges around oil prices.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.